So talk to me a little bit about how you feel about like the idea of right person, wrong role, or you know what I mean, like, and the different and the ability to see somebody for their strengths, rather than I guess for their weaknesses, right? Because it's like,
Yeah. So I think there's a lot packed into that I want to answer. So
sure,
first of all, I don't think, well, I think I still believe this, but I've always said, I don't think people show up to work and go, cool, I want to suck today.
right,
Like I want to piss everyone off, be shitty at my job, and suck. I don't think that usually happens. There's something going on that is causing someone to pull away from that. And part of it is job fit, right? And so, in this book, Good to Great, that was written in the 90s by
yeah, Jim Collins,
this great book. Yep, great book, Jim Collins. He talks about, and he kind of coined this, getting the wrong people on the bus, getting the wrong people off the bus. But people forget the quote that they always forget is actually, he says, is you have to define the seats. It's about putting the right people on the bus in the right seat. And so sometimes you have someone in the bus who's just in the wrong seat, but you have to be able to define that seat, right? What does that seat look like? What is needed in that seat? And then that person might be very talented. They're just in the wrong position on the bus. We just got to move them to a different seat. So it's not that they suck. It's just maybe they suck at the job they're doing right now. The question is why? Secondly, I like your analogy of building these characters because, as you know, in a lot of these games that you play where you have to build these characters, you're usually not a solo person. A lot of times you're combining with other people to do well. It's just the same thing in business.
mm,
You don't want to combine people with all the same strengths, right? You want to be able to counter set what you're good at with someone else,
that makes a lot of sense,
depending on what you're trying to achieve in that game.
right?
So
The swordsman needs the archer needs the swordsman. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And so if the objective is this, maybe the archer's more important than the swordsman. But if the objective changes, then the roles change. Well, you still need both of them. Just where do you need them and why do you need them? You have to be able to figure that out.
Right. Okay. So, in your experience doing this, what are some of the lessons or takeaways that you've kind of learned apply damn near to everybody as far as things they have to do to start being able to leverage or create this, talent acquisition machine in their business?
So I think the biggest, there's some pitfalls you have to avoid. Let's talk about those first.
Okay.
I think you have to get out of the mindset of I'm only looking for resumes for people I don't want to train. Right? So we fall into this pit trap of, okay, they have all these skill sets. This is going to be awesome. I don't have to train them.
Right.
And a lot of times what happens is you hire people with these skill sets and then you realize they don't apply to what you need, or you tell them the way you're doing it, the way you want them to do it, and they'll say, well, that's not the way I do it. That's not the way I was trained.
Right.
So sometimes you have to untrain and retrain anyway, and that's a lot harder.
Right.
So the first thing I always tell people is when you're hiring someone, instead of asking and saying, instead of saying, okay, I don't have to train them, you need to flip the question. You have to ask yourself, what am I not willing to train? And once you start figuring out what you're not willing to train, like they just have to have it because I don't have the time, the bandwidth, the ability, whatever. I'm not willing to train them. If you can start making your list that way, I think it could resonate a little bit more with people say, okay, they have to bring this with them because I'm not training them on this.
Yeah. Well, that actually kind of goes into a concept I've called drive-by delegation, which is essentially, you hire them and go, yeah, you take, and there's like the expectation of delivery, but there's like, and if they're anything other, and it's like most people are disappointed with the outcome. Obviously, that's a disaster that's a recipe for disaster. So, I totally agree with that. So, okay, so
and I said real quick, number two, real quick, when you're looking at, don't view a resume as an end all. Resume is just an autobiography of what they want you to know about them, right? And I'm not saying it's not important. Unfortunately, what we do with resumes sometimes is we have to look at resumes and say, okay, if they've done all these things, cool. How do we vet that, right? But I think you have to look at the resume of, okay, you may have 5 applicants with very similar resumes. The more powerful question is, how do they apply what they know? That's the powerful question. Okay, so if they have similar resumes, how does this person going to apply it? And the way they apply their knowledge, skills, and abilities, does that fit to what we need in the organization? because a loan originator is going to be different for different organizations and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. Like what you get out of that role changes depending on what is needed. So how do I apply all this information I have, and does it fit with what I need?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Now, would you say that, because I know that predictive index measures both behavioral and cognitive.
Yeah.
Would you say that the measuring what it needs is more of a behavioral need or a cognitive need?
Say that again.
Well, so you were essentially saying that, I'm going to be paraphrasing here. Just we've talked through a lot, but you essentially said some version of like identifying what the job needs, right? Yes. And so my question is, when you're looking at that need, when you're looking at a resume and you're trying to figure out how do they apply this, are you looking at that? I mean, do you feel like that's more of a behavioral conversation or more of a cognitive conversation?
I think it's both.
Okay.
So behavioral and in the context of, so let's define cognitive. The way we define cognitive ability is how fast you get or take in new information, how fast you take it in, and how fast you apply it. Like, what does that ramp up like? Like, we know, Preston, yours is a higher cognitive. I still think you cheated, but yeah, it's a higher cognitive.
I promise I didn't.
I'm just joking. I'm just teasing.
No, what's funny is so like McBee and I actually agree that we've never tested this, but I would bet money he has a higher IQ than I do. He's more book smart. He's just generally more.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, I think I got like 1 point, or like it's supposed to be like 500 is a perfect score. I got like 495. And so most people in our team that saw that were kind of upset and like, dude, no, there's no way. And I was like, yeah, I think it tests speed rather than like, I don't know that it's test.
How fast you take in information and apply information. Gotcha. It's relative to the job too, right? So like, for example, if I'm like doing a job that's very repetitive and doesn't change a lot, actuaries, I don't know, pick a job where it's just kind of the same thing over and over again. Cognitive isn't as impactful or as important than if you're like a B2B salesperson. Or, I always use doctors as an example. An ER surgeon's cognitive is probably higher than a pediatrician. They're both really intelligent. They're both really smart, but the job requirements change because you're getting new stuff as a surgeon that's instantaneous right there.
Like a trauma nurse, right? Oh, yeah. You have to think on the fly.
Yes. It's like, it's like you have to be able to take information, make decisions rapidly. And that's really what cognitive measures. The behavioral piece is the application of things. Like, okay, I have you probably met people with MBAs who aren't the brightest people in the world, right? The idea is, okay, this person has an MBA in business. Cool. They did the discipline to go through and get that piece of paper and get that degree. Awesome. Right. And so the question is, you get 2 Harvard MBAs. Doesn't mean they're going to work the same, because what we're not understanding is how do they apply that information? So how much risk do they take in? How much time do they take to make decisions? How do they communicate their ideas? How do they process information? Those kind of things are not in a resume. And you don't hire a resume, you hire a whole person. The person who actually comes to work for you every day. You need to understand that whole person, not just a part of who they are.